Welcome to Roaming Minds.
We talk about the logic behind thinking and why it stops working the way you expected it to.
This season will follow one primary question. What happens when you do the thing that was supposed to make the thinking stop, but it just kept looping?
You wrote it down, you told someone, you put it on your calendar. Sometimes doing that works. Sometimes it just moves it somewhere else that still requires your attention.
We will explore this alongside expert guests this season in addition to our usual format. I'm AJ.
And I'm Carlos. Let's get into it.
All right. Today we have a special guest joining us, which is always fun and exciting. I love getting perspectives from other people. And so I think we all have this kind of common understanding that our minds don't necessarily clock out at the end of the day. It kind of keeps rolling. It keeps replaying what happened. If we had a specific conflict, it just kind of keeps replaying that conflict, all sorts of fun things. And typically, our response these days is, well, is there an app for that? Is there an app that'll just stop this from happening? And it's really interesting because I don't think we've gotten there yet. We haven't actually answered that question, or maybe want to answer that question, maybe better. But to that end, our guest today is Himanshu. He is a designer, founder, and meditation teacher. And we are super excited to have him on today and would love to give him the opportunity to expand upon what he is currently operating at and how he's handling all of these things.
Thank you, AJ, and thank you, Carlos. Glad to be on your show. Yeah, I'm Himanshu Bharadwaj. Design is my core profession, and over the years, I've worked for small, medium, and large companies, helping them with user experience design, marketing design, and brand design. I've been an entrepreneur a few times, and these days I am mainly working with startups, helping them with their design needs as well as mentoring them. And those along with those interests, I have interest in meditation, mind sciences, cognitive science, and I use that learning for business. And I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to jump right in based off of some of the things that you said, because meditation and design seem really, really far away. So what kind of led you to not just pursue each one, but to kind of, because based off of previous conversation, we talked a little bit about joyful design, which to me seems like meditation might have influenced that a little bit. I could be entirely wrong, but I would love to hear more about that.
So it's not just the design. Let's look at it from a business lens. Everything in business is basically trying to sell to a customer. Now, how does a customer buy a product? The only way you can sell a customer, or the most impact you can make in a customer, is by impacting the way the customer thinks about you, and that's branding, changing the perception and creating persuasion, that's marketing, creating an experience, which is user experience, and that user experience happens in the mind of the customer. So all these three areas happen in the mind of the customer. The sales pitch you do to a client is basically trying to influence a customer's mind. The innovation you do first happens in your own mind before you articulate it visually and verbally to the team or on paper. So mind is the ultimate machine, receptor for all business purposes and all life purposes. So I got this aha moment having worked in design over the years, and saw that we were and even at a business level, when I was creating business, we were creating business from a more materialistic sense of things. We thought design is an artifact. We thought business is basically producing a software or a physical product. But the reason for success is not just to make a good looking product. It has a big reason beyond the physicality of things. So that led me into looking at mind, body, and spirit. All these three things are typically important for business and life.
When we had previously talked, we talked about that distinguishment between how the West versus the East views the mind. And since it's come up a couple of times already today, I would love it if you could kind of talk to those differences and give people an overview as to how the East approaches the mind and how the West approaches it and how those differ.
Yeah, sure. So in the West, there is still a conflict whether psychology is a science or not. There is a debate, and because the definition of science, modern science, if you see, is it has to be scalable, repeatable, falsifiable. All those criterias have to be applied to mind, and nobody has seen the mind. Nobody really can measure the mind. It's very hard. The research that was done in the mind sciences is actually obsolete now. A lot of that is obsolete. Everybody's minds are different. People think differently. So all that. There is a big debate, and I think the Western mind sciences is in the early stage of development. The Eastern and typically the Indian ancient mind sciences has evolved over thousands of years, not just hundreds of years that the West has evolved. And mind can be experienced. So it's an experiential entity rather than something that is a material entity that you can see based on the modern instruments. The modern science relies on the modern set of instruments. To understand the mind, you have to typically experience it. To experience the mind, you have to go inwards. The modern science urges you to look outwards in the material sense of things. To understand the mind, you have to turn inwards. Mind is typically not in the brain, which a lot of people have misconceptions about. Mind is everywhere, within the body, even outside the body. And in fact, Schrodinger has said there is only one mind in the universe. So there are disparities in the way we look at mind in East and West. So once you go inwards and try to understand it, read how mind has been really described, what is the anatomy of mind? People have not really in the West understood the anatomy of mind to that level as much as the East has understood.
How would you approach the West, start to implement some of those ideas of the Eastern way of looking at mind? How do we start integrating that into the Western view? It's more of a bigger question.
Yes.
I think it's definitely something that the audience might be interested in how we can start approaching some of those viewpoints and bring it to, toward the Western as well.
So I think let me take you back into history of how the modern science has evolved from Copernicus, who basically figured out Earth revolves around the sun and the whole movement, and then everything can be calculated. And then you have Francis Bacon, and then Galileo, and Galileo figured out few things, and ultimately it came down to science being mathematical in nature. And then finally, Newton created these laws, and everything basically follows the law. So, which meant that science is a measurable science which follows certain set of laws, and those laws cannot be violated. So the problem happened at Galileo when Galileo made everything mathematical, and that is the error that has happened in science, and then we lost this subjectivity in science. I think in the modern context, that has been invalidated. The previous theories have been invalidated because of, say, thermodynamics, where you have the concept of entropy. Now there is no, it cannot be calculated. Or, for example, in quantum physics, you have tunnel effect, you have superposition, you have how the particle behaves both as wave and particle. All those things don't really follow the laws of science. At a particle level, the particle does not follow gravity, for example, and modern science was only looking at gravity and mass. So it went beyond gravity and mass. So science is coming towards that area, and I think that is important to understand human mind. Um, because the laws may be local in nature to certain parameters, but I think when you look at cosmos, consciousness, uh, things change. So in business too, everything is so mathematical, no more logical and deterministic. Um, so we have lost the probabilistic nature of modern business. We deal with uncertainty in business, so everybody wants more certainty. However, um, nature works on probabilities. Even AI is deterministic, it tells you this is it. But for example, let me give you an example. If I'm looking at your face, if an AI looks at your face, it will say, okay, this is not Peter, this is not Sam, this is not um, uh, Joanne, this is not some other name. So it will create these no, 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 and then yes. Okay. Now, if when human brain looks at somebody's face, it will not negate the data. It will basically converge all the data that it already carries in the memory and say, this is it. This is Carlos. So there is probability, there is high probability that this is Carlos, because I have probably seen Carlos 10 years ago. So it is part of the memory system. So nature works differently. And to, to summarize your answer, the Western concept of mind body consciousness is important to put in the new the Eastern concept of mind body and consciousness will help understand business life much better in modern day context.
So there was a lot in there that I remember. I don't see it on in my bookshelf at the moment. It must be tucked away in another one outside of my immediate space. But I remember reading about how physics research over the past like 100 years, people were or students were going into these physics programs, and everyone was being like, well, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to study that area because it would disprove that it's useless to go down that road because we've already proved it over here. And it, to me, that's so fascinating because I'm of the mindset of I just want to learn more. There's always going to be more. What if we were wrong at that point in time? Where does that subjective nature kind of come into play? And I know a couple of researchers who are kind of doing their gold standard is now moving away from that quantitative lens, and now they're like, well, here's the qualitative and here's the quantitative side, which that to me makes at least a little bit more sense. At least you can back up the things that you're saying. But the question I guess that I was thinking of during that time is how does that subjectivity play a role in the business work that you've done? Because that's a very quantitative field. If it's not producing metrics, if it's not producing value, what does that look like? And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've been doing this for many, many years. There's clearly been some good success integrating that. So I would love to hear kind of how you made that work and bridge that gap.
Sure. I think the quantitative methods have so become deep rooted that today, even in AI, when you use AI to optimize your resume for ATS systems, you need to put those hard numbers for ATS system to approve your resume before it even goes to the hiring manager. And these numbers need not be true, and we're just basically trying to overcome the ATS barriers. So if you look at decision making at the C-suite level, a lot of that decision making happens through intuition, not through numbers. So in the hierarchy of things, first you have information at the lowermost level. And I think you can even parallel track it with the development of internet. The early days of internet was basically just information. You had websites with information. So even at the lowermost level of business, you are basically the person at the tail end of that business is collecting information as a researcher. Then you have people who are at a managerial level who are processing that information. So they are creating analytics and insights from that information, but it's still rooted within the limited area of the research data. Now that research data typically is an average of things. So people are believing in the averages. However, every business wants to innovate. Innovation never happens in the averages. Innovation happens at the extremities of that data. This is a fundamental problem with business. So you have to really understand what are the extremes in your data. For that, you need better insight. And that insight comes from wisdom, intuition, and experience, which typically looking at a quantitative data, you really cannot figure out. So these are the abstract areas of data or information analysis that we tend to ignore. And this is why a lot of research today fails, whether it's customer research, brand research, marketing research, because we look at a small data set, and then the way we process that information, how we actually come up with our final set of recommendations are rooted in some templates that everybody has followed in the industry. We have not really gone beyond those templates and tried to falsify them and break them and really understand the human mind, which works differently. It does not really work on those parameters or boxes. So we talk about going out of the box, but we are actually working within the box all the time.
That is an interesting concept of how we sometimes think that we're being mavericks and we're working outside within a system, and we're really working within a system. I think AJ and I have discussed that time and time again, how we have this perception of us fighting the system, but we're really just fighting ways to work within the system, but not realizing where we are with it. We're still within the same system.
Yes, yes. So I'll give another analogy. If you look at nature, because business should be inspired by nature, and there are so many different aspects of nature. So if you look at nature, everything is different, and there are multiple versions of the same thing. So you have a human being. Every human being is different. Our fingerprints are different. Our looks are different. Our eyes are different. DNA is different. So look at birds. There is variety of birds. Look at even the smallest organism, biggest organism, planets, galaxies. Every galaxy is different. So nature celebrates differences. When you get into business or even nation states, there are set of laws, there are policies, there is an assembly line. We try to fit people in the box, and we want them to adhere and follow that rule. Look at religion. You put everybody under a same ideology. Look at different ideologies, capitalism, socialism. It's all about putting people in the box. And which is why human beings have so much conflict, because it goes against the very grain of how the nature works, how the cosmos works. Um, each one has their ego, that is part of the mind. Each one has their own way of thinking. So, respecting that, accepting that is so important. And we create an ad, and we want everybody to follow that ad across different continents. The cultures are different, the languages are different. So we try to standardize things, which is the industrial way of doing things. We standardize education, we standardize information. Our ideology, if we have a certain ideology, we put it in the AI, and we want the whole world to follow that ideology. That is standardization. That is working with the minds of people and influencing the mind to follow certain things. So, for hundreds and thousands of years, we've tried to do that, and that has created conflict.
So I definitely, I've got a wild, I actually wrote a paper when I was in undergrad that was talking about the standardization of everything to the point where we've lost a lot of personality, or at least personalities. From my understanding, those identity level things that we used to have kind of moved online to the point where now outward identity as a human is kind of fallen by the wayside, and unless it's in that kind of digital space, we don't have that same relationship to identity that at least that I had when we were growing up. When I was growing up and we were in high school, you had this group of kids, you had this group of kids, and this group of kids, and this group of kids, and you could all distinguish them because all you had to do was look visually. You could see it. It was clear as day. And now you still have the groups of kids, but I mean, everybody's pretty much wearing the same thing. They all look almost like the same human being, which is weird to me. So I remember I was having a conversation with somebody a while back, and they were like, I forget exactly how many, but he was talking about having employees, and he's like, there's really only 6 different types of people. And instantly I was like, 6 different types of people? That to me seems a little far-fetched. And from what it sounds like, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. It sounds like you're saying that's quite the opposite.
Yes, yes. And there are standardized tests for personalities, for evaluation. Every year, end of the year, you do this manager evaluation. You put people in those boxes. So that's why people have so much anxiety before their annual evaluation in their job, because they don't know which box they will be put in.
Right.
So
Which,
yeah, so it goes against the grain of what we are built for and what we want to experience in life, and that is freedom, that is liberation. If I were to expand that idea of freedom a little more,
please do.
So, the body is kind of a vehicle, but ultimately everybody wants to feel that liberation. When we buy a product, we want to feel we want to feel liberated. For example, I buy an Apple computer. The joy comes from that liberated feeling that I can do so much with this computer. I've got so many softwares in this computer. So my imagination is my only obstacle to my growth. So that is a liberating feeling. Now imagine I create a marketing campaign for that. That will succeed versus if I say, okay, this computer has so much RAM, the screen size is X, it comes with metallic finish. It won't influence so much. And that is
Mhm.
why understanding the mind is so important.
Carlos and I have talked about the Western idea of freedom quite a bit, and that doesn't sound like what you're talking. When I think of or at least when I hear the word freedom, I think of July 4th. We get to go set off fireworks because it's America, and that's definitely not the freedom that you're referencing. Just want to make sure that that's um, clear. You're talking about a more of an internal freedom, freedom of choice, freedom of expression. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one.
Yeah, so let me expand on this thought a little more. So there are actually just three possibilities, and tell me if there is a fourth possibility for anything that happens in this world. So you can say it happens by chance, which is basically the scientific way of saying things. Big Bang happened by chance, or things happened by chance.
Mhm.
The second way of interpreting any event, the company succeeded by chance because you were at the right place and the right time. Facebook succeeded. So that is by chance. The second way of interpreting is there was an intervention of some sort, whether it's in some cultures, they say God does this. So you basically attribute something to an external force. Likewise, you can say market forces, you can say some force manipulated the market, and which is why I failed.
Mhm.
So that is the second reason
Mhm.
for interpreting any event in life. And both of them don't really smell freedom because you are bound by either an external force or by a chance happening, which happens in time. Okay? You are bound by time, which is also a human construct. There is no time in the brain, or there is no, when you look at quantum physics, um, time actually goes away. And even in the human consciousness, the waking state does experience space and time, but if you go in a deep sleep, there is no space and time. So the third possibility is the possibility of agency, that things happen because I did something, whether I did it 10 years ago, whether I did it now, or whether I did it hundreds of years ago through the genetic code or through some incarnations or whatever.
Mhm.
But that is the third way of explaining that everything happens through my own agency. So, definition of freedom is basically having that agency to perform, having an agency to think, having an agency to actually influence the outcome of our actions. So, that is the true definition of freedom that leads to liberation. So you feel more liberated when you have that agency. So even in the workforce, if you are a manager but you don't really have any freedom to act,
Mhm.
you will not feel good about it. You will get burnt out, you will get frustrated because you are constantly being micromanaged. The more agency you provide to an employee, the better the employee will perform. That's human nature. So uh, so tell me if there is a fourth out probability, but I see those three.
I don't know of one. I was so happy that you got to agency. You have no idea. We've been talking about it for the past year and a half on the podcast. So I was like, yes, this is amazing. Just coming from everything that I've experienced throughout this lifetime, that's always been my driving factor is if I can just get to agency and I can just find that agency, I have a chance of finding that freedom, of finding I guess when I was younger, it was always happiness. I was like, I gotta find the happiness. And it none of it really worked up until the point where I found that agency because I was just too busy blaming this. It's this person's problem. It's that person's problem. There any number of reasons were wrong because it was somebody else's fault. It wasn't mine. I had no control over it. And I know control and agency aren't entirely the same thing because agency is more I'm going to take this action and influence rather than I'm going to pull the strings and make sure it comes out in my favor kind of thing. And so that I do have to, the two things that I'm curious about your design approach is you mentioned a while back about the mind and emotions. When you were giving the example of the RAM on the computer, this doesn't sell. But when I sell you the freedom, that kind of then implies that. So what role does emotion play in that? And how does emotion influence the mind? And then how do we go ahead and start building agency into our design, or what does that look like? Have you had experience with that?
From the materialistic science point of view, you can say agencies are basically a play of neurochemicals or hormones in the body. However, it's much more deeper. How we experience things happens through the senses in the human body. Senses are basically the receptors of information. So there are about 34 senses in the human body, not 5. And we receive that information through all these sources. That information is processed, and we create these sensations in the body, and the mind creates perception. So sensation and perception creates experience. So you need a combination of both. A mind is not alone experiencing the emotions, and the body alone is not experiencing perception. A body experiences the experience, basically. Body, mind, and spirit is the experiencer. So sensations and perceptions create experience. Now, that is a fundamental flaw in modern brand marketing, business, user experience, product experience, because we look at experience as engagement. We look at experience as time spent with the product. We look at experience as removal of friction. We ignore the abstract areas of that experience and the emotional aspect of that experience, even though we know people buy products because of emotional connection with the product. We write in the briefs and the documents that we want our end customer to have an emotional connection with the company, with the brand, with the product, but we hardly ever look at these emotions. So now, going into that detail, once you look at what are the senses you want to involve with the experience that you want to create, what kind of emotions. So there are fundamentally about 9 emotions, and then they can be broken up. So now it's a permutation and combination of that then goes into the mind. And even at the mind level, what kind of mind are you trying to influence? So we hardly ever do that in our research, in our strategy, in our brand documents, and also in the way we sell and market our products. So
Mhm.
this is a very gray and missing area of our modern business, which is basically a more reductionist way of thinking. For example, I'll tell you, in a marketing department, you have somebody called a creative director and somebody called a strategy director. Now, creativity, when you remove that, when you remove strategy from creativity, it's not creativity at all. Then it's basically execution, visual execution or artistic execution, whether it's verbal or visual. And strategy without creativity is not strategy at all. So that's a reductionist way of thinking. You cut it down to that part where just it cannot work as an ecosystem.
I do. I had you this relates to the previous question before where you listed the three. I think that there is a fourth category where it's possibly a combination of two or more of those things at the same time. What do you think about that? Because as you were describing it, I was like, well, sometimes I can feel two of those things happening simultaneously. So that's why I think that there is a fourth category, but it's not necessarily a unique category. It's just a combination of those three.
Yeah. So there is a definition of luck. It's opportunity meets preparation.
Yeah.
So now there is an abstract thing called opportunity. And then, people have defined it further and they say unexpected things that happen. Then they talk about, more parameters. But I feel that things we don't know, we attribute to an external thought, idea, or a force. Things we know, we try to own it. So the more we know, the more we try to own the agency.
Mm-hmm.
So the definition will actually keep expanding and going back to the agency because our ego is very strong. Ego wants that credit. Ego wants to be the doer. They don't want to give the agency to some external force or something else. No employee wants their boss to make their life decision, even though they are forced to do it. So, so if you give agency to the person, nobody will want a boss in their company. That is the human nature. If you give the agency, nobody wants to be ruled by a set of politicians. If you give the agency, nobody will want borders. So that is the human nature. But at the same time, when our ego becomes big, we draw boundaries because we want to protect those
Right.
egos. So we create these titles, we create nation states, we create languages, different languages. We create secret codes for communication in the army to protect that freedom.
Okay. This one's still kind of formulating, but I think I got enough to kind of go on. When it comes to modern day applications and the things that we interact with daily, whatever the case may be, uh, do you see there being that agency that you're talking about baked into those applications? Or on the flip side too, because you were talking about how when you're marketing to people, you have to think about all of these things and uh, tailor them to invoke certain emotions and things like that. One of the things that concern me moving forward is as we start to know more and more and can, for lack of a better term, quantify them more and more, does that present an issue for the people who are ultimately using the technology? Or is that something that we shouldn't be too concerned about?
It's a good question. I think we are in the very early stages of modern business. If you look at Peter Drucker's definition of business, or Philip Kotler, there were these 5 P's of marketing. And then they become, I think it started with 3 P's and 4 P's and then 5, 7. Ultimately, very late in his life, he added P is equal to people. So all along, we were doing marketing without people. So the human aspect was missing in business. And by the time people started embracing the people centric nature of business, digital marketing or digital technology came into picture. So the offline theories became obsolete in the digital world. And now, in the last 20 years, as we have progressed in the digital area, AI has come along. So now those theories are still not baked in fully, and we have the AI uh, centric technology everywhere, which means new ways of looking at business and humans and people. So we are in such an early stage. Even if you look at AI right now, it is similar to the early stages of internet. You used to have Lycos and InfoSeek, those directories. Yahoo was a directory back then. And you had Netscape browser that AOL bought, and then AOL, I don't think AOL exists in the way it used to be. It used to be the dominant force back then. So
Mm-hmm.
we are in those very early stages of technology, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
The Google has not come yet. And the Google was the information engine. And then slowly now, if you look at AI, AI has gone beyond information. It understands human behavior. So which means from a physical level, it has gone into the mental level, which is why it is, challenging for everybody to, and people are worried about their job, because all along machines were the ones who would do the physical tasks. So the mental task was within our control. We had the agency to perform
Mm-hmm.
the mental task and decide. Now AI has taken over that mental function. There are good things and bad things about it. But since you asked about the human centricity, I believe the opportunity is there for AI to actually understand human mind much better as it becomes more intelligent, which means that the software applications, specifically since you asked about that,
Mm-hmm.
will become more customizable,
Mm-hmm.
which means every customer, every user will experience a marketing campaign, a brand campaign, or a user or a software based on their taste, liking, emotions, period of time at that point of time, location, geographically. So all those parameters, you can create a very, very personalized application. So those applications have not yet been built. What I
Mm-hmm.
see people building are basically quicker versions of their SaaS application. So they are following the same process they used to build the SaaS application. All they are doing is compressing the timeline and the cost involved so that they can churn out things faster. That
Mm-hmm.
is not really the best use of AI. That is the cost efficient use of AI, using AI as a tool to basically accelerate this SaaS or the old ways of software development.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So we really haven't gotten to the full capabilities of exactly what AI is going to be able to do, which makes sense. I know, just thinking about it personally, I've built a lot of personalized software that is strictly tuned to my workflows. And not because I needed it. I already had the workflows in place, but having those personalized ones has made everything actually manageable to where I can actually get the work done that I need, and keep going and keep pushing. I guess my biggest concern was I did a lot of work with augmented reality systems in grad school. Not I was never a big fan of virtual reality, so I kind of stayed away from that a little bit. Um, but if that and we kind of see more and more of it each and every year, month, and it's kind of a slow takeover. Meta's kind of like slipping in the AR glasses here, and they're very basic and rudimentary compared to what that kind of technology can do. I To me, I see it as a much more imperative that we begin designing in that way, especially at the application layer. Not just I know most of the conversation we've had at business layer, which is I think is super great and super important. Um, that one doesn't concern me as much because I feel like that trajectory is, correct me if I'm wrong, heading in that direction anyway. But when we start advertising directly to people's eyeballs, that's when it concerns me, because it's almost like a direct portal to people's mind view. And that's where I get a little bit, I'm like, I really hope we start baking agency into everything before that happens. But it's interesting. Times are definitely changing, and AI is accelerating all of that at just rapid speeds. Does that quick or rapid innovation or affect how that mind kind of operates in this day and age, or is that something that we shouldn't really be too worried about?
Sure. So you talked about Meta. Meta created this metaverse, and you talked about AR and VR, and why
Hmm.
it has not really caught on.
Hmm.
One reason is when you have to put on something, that's an added effort.
Hmm.
So when you have to put a gadget, that added effort and cost and maintenance and all that is a practical problem. It needs to be integrated in the everyday objects, which has not really happened so much. So they created a different class for that. It wasn't integrated in the daily use objects. So anything that you do, which is an additional element, there is a learning curve, there is an adoption curve. That's one. But the other deeper reason is metaverse and AR, VR did not really go deeper into the mind and understand how the mind works. So our perception creates reality. So if you are creating reality apps, then everybody's reality is different. So the way we think changes our reality. If you are trying to show the same reality to everybody, then the experience is not novel enough. To create better novelty, you need to be able to create different realities based on the person's thinking perceptions, and give them the agency to change that reality the way they want. That is something AI might be able to do in the future.
Hmm. I I think that was absolutely wonderful way to put it. And so really, I'm just going to kind of summarize. Um, we've really been discussing this idea of how the mind interplays with everything around it, and that each and every single one of our minds is different, and that it in order for us to find that agency, that level of freedom, we kind of have to understand these concepts, um, that everybody's going to kind of react in their own separate manner. And that's okay. It's not something to be tossed inside of a box and said, here you go, just sit here. But rather to kind of, I don't want to say open the box, but have a bunch of different boxes that are all inside of one that everybody fits nicely into, and that's okay. That's kind of uh, our ideal situation at this moment in time. Correct me if I'm wrong. Well, that is all we have. I want to thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much. That's the episode.
If something is still ruminating, that's the specific thing one inactive session is built for. The session link is at theinactive.com.
If it was worth your time, subscribe. New episode every week for this season.
And there is a question waiting for you in the comments. Answer it if you feel so inclined.
We read them.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.